The courtroom was quiet, eerily so. The distant hum of fluorescent lights seemed loud in the heavy silence, amplifying the tension that hung thickly in the air. Isaac Bennett stood alone at the defendant's table, his palms sweaty, heart hammering in his chest. He clutched a stack of documents, his only weapon in this fierce battle against a powerful system determined to crush him. Judge Victor Stanton leaned back in his high-backed leather chair, studying Isaac with clear disdain. A thin, mocking smile curled at the corner of his lips. Across from Isaac, Nathan Calloway, Capital Trust Bank's top attorney, smirked openly, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored suit casually, confidently, arrogantly. "Mr. Bennett," Judge Stanton drawled, his voice dripping with mockery, "you intend to represent yourself in my courtroom? Do you think a high school history teacher can successfully argue against seasoned professionals?" Stanton paused, his gaze coldly amused. "Frankly, I expect today's proceedings will be rather entertaining." Soft chuckles rose from the plaintiff's table. Calloway leaned toward his associates, murmuring something inaudible but derisive. Isaac's pulse quickened, humiliation and rage twisting in his stomach. They thought this was funny, a joke. They thought he was a joke. But Isaac drew in a deep breath, straightening his shoulders. His eyes locked defiantly onto the judge's face. "I'm not here to entertain anyone, Your Honor," Isaac declared firmly, his voice resonating through the courtroom. "I'm here because justice has been denied, not just to me, but to countless others. I will fight for what's rightfully mine and for every person who has ever been wronged by your corrupt system." A stunned silence fell over the courtroom. Stanton's smirk faltered momentarily, irritation flashing briefly in his eyes. Calloway's amused expression hardened, replaced by wary hostility. Isaac could feel every pair of eyes burning into him, their whispered judgments sharp as knives. But he didn't care, not anymore. 5 months earlier, Isaac Bennett's life had been completely overturned by a single, ruthless document from Capital Trust Bank. He remembered the exact moment vividly, as though it had just happened yesterday. It was an ordinary afternoon until he opened the envelope and read those words that changed everything. Notice of foreclosure. Isaac's mind had reeled in disbelief, panic tightening his throat. His family home, the home his father had painstakingly paid off just before passing away, was suddenly at risk. How could this happen? He frantically searched through drawers and boxes until he discovered a second mortgage agreement, purportedly signed by his father mere weeks before he died. The signature was suspiciously neat, unnaturally steady, nothing like the trembling hand of the dying man who had raised him. His heart froze. That signature was fake. Desperate for answers, Isaac immediately dialed the bank, gripping the phone tightly, his voice trembling yet resolute. "There's been a mistake, my father couldn't have signed this. He was hospitalized at that time. It's impossible." The voice on the other end, indifferent and unfeeling, crushed his hope instantly. "Our records don't lie, Mr. Bennett. If you have an issue, you should hire a lawyer. Otherwise, vacate the property within 2 weeks." Isaac had stood frozen in shock, the receiver slipping from his numb fingers, crashing onto the hardwood floor. His gaze drifted around the house, family photos smiling warmly from the walls, worn furniture holding decades of memories, shelves filled with books he'd read with his father. Could they truly take all this away based on a lie? Determined, Isaac visited the local branch of Capital Trust Bank the next morning, hoping a face-to-face discussion might clear things up. But instead of compassion, he was met with dismissive indifference from the branch manager, a middle-aged man whose smug superiority was instantly apparent. "People like you never learn, do they?" the manager sneered, his voice saturated with contempt. "The system isn't built to serve your kind. I suggest you start packing now, it's a lost cause." Isaac's jaw tightened. A burning indignation rose within him, but he bit back angry words, knowing any outburst would only prove their point, that he was powerless, insignificant, and unworthy of justice. The days that followed brought crushing disappointment. Isaac pleaded with numerous law firms, only to be repeatedly rejected due to a lack of resources, the complexity of the case, or simply because they believed it was unwinnable. Even the community legal aid office turned him away, overwhelmed and underfunded. Time dwindled rapidly, each passing day intensifying Isaac's desperation. Sleep became a distant memory, replaced by long nights spent poring over dense legal textbooks, researching foreclosure statutes, and fighting exhaustion with strong coffee and sheer willpower. He felt utterly alone until Sophia Carter, his kind neighbor, offered encouragement when he needed it most. "Isaac," Sophia said softly, eyes full of quiet strength, "you're not only fighting for your home. You're fighting for all those who faced the same injustice but couldn't fight back. You have to keep going." Her words echoed in his mind now, fueling his determination as he faced the judge's scornful gaze. Back in the courtroom, Stanton broke the charged silence with an irritated grunt, leaning forward impatiently. "Proceed, Mr. Bennett. Let's hear this compelling evidence that you claim proves the bank is committing fraud." Isaac steadied himself, stepping forward boldly. "I discovered that the signature on the second mortgage is a forgery. My father was physically incapable of signing any documents at that time," Isaac explained firmly, holding up the papers clearly for all to see. "This is blatant fraud, and I have proof." A ripple of surprise swept through the courtroom. Judge Stanton scowled slightly, shifting in his seat. Nathan Calloway's confident smirk vanished completely, replaced with thinly veiled alarm. It was clear they hadn't anticipated this. But Judge Stanton quickly recovered, dismissing Isaac's claim with a wave of his hand. "Signatures change, Mr. Bennett. People sign differently under stress. Do you have anything more substantial, or are you merely wasting this court's valuable time?" Isaac felt rage rise like a tidal wave within him, hot and bitter. He fought to maintain his composure. "I have sworn testimony from the notary public who stamped this document," he declared steadily. "She admits she never actually witnessed my father signing anything. The entire foreclosure is built on a lie." Stanton's expression hardened, clearly annoyed at the unexpected complication. "Mr. Calloway," the judge barked sharply, "your response." Calloway quickly rose, regaining some measure of composure. "Your Honor, this is a desperate attempt to stall legitimate foreclosure proceedings. Our documentation is sound, and the bank has acted completely within the law. The accusations of fraud are baseless." Stanton leaned back, seemingly satisfied. "Unless you have immediate, compelling evidence that contradicts the bank's claims," Stanton said sternly to Isaac, "I see no reason to further delay the foreclosure." Isaac met Stanton's gaze squarely, unwavering. "If you allow this to proceed," he said, his voice steady and clear, "you'll be complicit in a grave injustice. But make no mistake, I won't give up. I'll keep fighting until everyone sees the truth behind your corrupt facade." For a fleeting second, Stanton hesitated, his eyes narrowing, momentarily uncertain. But quickly, he composed himself, banging his gavel sharply. "We'll reconvene in 2 weeks. You have until then, Mr. Bennett, to present conclusive evidence, or the foreclosure stands." Isaac nodded slowly, determination etched deep into his face. As he turned toward the exit, whispers surged around him, shock, disbelief, curiosity. The powerful had tried to crush him, confident in their victory, yet Isaac refused to be broken. He was ready to battle relentlessly, not just for his own home, but for every innocent victim silenced by injustice. He knew what lay ahead wouldn't be easy. They'd retaliate brutally, doing everything possible to break him down. But Isaac Bennett had chosen this fight. He was prepared to risk everything to win, not just for himself, but for every voiceless person that the system had ever oppressed. The powerful had underestimated him, and soon they would understand their grave mistake. Because Isaac Bennett had nothing left to lose, and everything to fight for. The sun hadn't yet risen when Isaac Bennett sat down at his kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of documents and the fading aroma of reheated instant coffee. His eyes were dry from lack of sleep, but his mind refused to slow. Every page, every line he read felt like another attempt to claw back the truth, one piece at a time, from the maw of a system built to hide it. 2 weeks. That was all Judge Stanton had given him. 14 days to produce compelling evidence of intentional mortgage fraud, or Capital Trust Bank would win by default. The thought made Isaac's hands shake. He had survived on fury, on stubbornness, on memory, but now, memory wasn't enough. He needed proof. As the morning light crept in through the window blinds, Isaac's phone buzzed. A message from his friend Marcus flashed on the cracked screen. "Meet me at 9. Got someone you should talk to. Important." Isaac didn't hesitate. He bundled his notes, shoved them into his backpack, and headed out. Marcus was waiting at the corner diner, nursing a cup of black coffee like it held the weight of the world. Across from him sat a woman in her early 40s, dressed simply in a navy cardigan, her brown hair pulled into a tight bun. Her eyes flicked up as Isaac approached, sharp, wary, calculating. "This is Eva Chandler," Marcus said. "She used to work in compliance at Capital Trust." Isaac's heart skipped. "Used to?" he asked, sliding into the booth across from her. "I resigned 3 months ago," Eva replied, her voice low. "After realizing my reports were being buried. After I saw what they did to a family who, like you, never signed the second mortgage they were accused of defaulting on." Isaac leaned forward, his voice tight with hope and suspicion. "Why come forward now?" Eva looked away, chewing her lower lip before answering. "Because it's happening again. Because I saw your name in an internal email thread. And because I remember your father." Isaac froze. "He came to the branch once," she continued. "Asked about a reconsolidation notice that made no sense to him. I remember because he was so polite, confused, but gentle. A week later, the system logged a second mortgage on his account with an attached signature." Isaac's breath hitched. "He was in the hospital by then." "I know." Eva's hands trembled slightly as she reached into her purse and pulled out a small USB drive. "This has redacted emails. Internal memos. Processing logs. It's not enough for a conviction, but it's enough to ask the right questions." Isaac took it slowly, reverently. "This could change everything," he whispered. "It might," she said. "But be careful. The deeper you dig, the darker it gets. You're not just fighting a bank. You're threatening an institution that spent decades ensuring no one can touch them." He left the diner shaken but invigorated. Back home, he plugged in the USB and sifted through the contents. What he found made his stomach twist. There were memos marked high-risk property zones, targeting areas with predominantly Black and Hispanic homeowners. Notes referencing strategic foreclosure acceleration and minimizing litigation exposure through aggressive eviction timing. One thread chilled him to the bone. Subject: Bennett property. "Let's move fast on this one. Paperwork's messy, but profile suggests low resistance. Initiate before the next of kin gets traction." They had known. They had picked his father's home because they believed no one would fight back. Isaac's rage boiled over, but this time, it wasn't helpless. It was purposeful. That night, he called Linda Ortiz, a young paralegal he'd met during one of his many courthouse visits. She was sharp, idealistic, and frustrated with the legal machine she worked within. When Isaac explained what he had, she didn't hesitate. "I'll meet you tomorrow," she said. "I know someone in mortgage fraud litigation. He can't officially take your case, but he can guide you." Isaac barely slept. His dreams were broken flashes of memory, his father laughing as he painted the fence, his mother humming in the kitchen, the old couch where they'd watched late-night documentaries together. The life they'd built in that house was more than real estate. It was history. Legacy. He couldn't let them erase it. The next morning, Isaac and Linda met in the corner of a dusty law library. With her help, he drafted a supplemental motion to submit Eva's documents into the case record, requesting a preliminary injunction against the bank's foreclosure sale. He cited specific legal precedents, including Martin versus Horizon Bank, where forged notary signatures had led to a reversal of foreclosure and criminal charges. By the end of the day, Isaac filed the motion by hand. The clerk behind the glass window raised an eyebrow. "Back again?" she asked. Isaac smiled faintly. "I'm just getting started." As he turned to leave, his phone buzzed again. Unknown number. He answered warily. "Mr. Bennett," a familiar voice drawled. "This is Nathan Calloway. I'd like to extend a settlement offer." Isaac's grip on the phone tightened. "You're offering to settle?" "Yes," Calloway replied smoothly. "A 5-figure payout and 3 months of relocation support. In exchange, you agree to drop your fraud claims and withdraw the motion for injunction." Isaac's blood ran cold. "And sign an NDA, I assume?" "Naturally." He hung up without replying. That night, his lights went out. At first, he thought it was a citywide outage. But the neighbors' homes were still aglow. Only his had gone dark. He checked his app. Payment declined. Account frozen. Again. It was retaliation. When he tried calling customer support, he was told the account was under routine fraud review. He laughed bitterly. Of course. They were trying to choke him again, strip him of the basic means to survive. But this time, he was ready. He still had Linda. He still had Eva's files. And he still had the truth. But not everyone around him was insulated. 2 days later, Linda called him in a panic. "They just fired me," she said breathlessly. "Effective immediately. I think they found out I was helping you." Isaac sat on the floor, his back against the cold kitchen cabinet. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I'm not," she replied. "You're going to win this, Isaac. I know it." That same evening, a note appeared taped to his door. "You've made powerful enemies. Think hard before dragging this any further." No signature. No symbol. Just a threat. Isaac stared at it for a long time. Then he folded it neatly, placed it in a plastic evidence bag, and slid it into his file folder. Let them threaten. He'd been threatened before, by poverty, by silence, by despair. They didn't scare him anymore. What terrified him now was that if he gave up, it would send a message louder than any lawsuit ever could, that the powerful could get away with anything. 2 days before the next hearing, he received an email from Judge Stanton's clerk. The motion had been moved up, an early hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning. It was a trap. Isaac knew it. They wanted to catch him unprepared. But instead, it gave him less time to second-guess himself. That night, he copied every document to 3 separate USB drives. One he hid in the lining of his backpack. The second he gave to Marcus. The third he left at the local newspaper office with a handwritten note. "Release this if I don't walk out of that courtroom." Then he looked around his house one last time. The photos. The couch. The small divots in the floor where his childhood train tracks had once clicked together. This was worth fighting for. He slept in his clothes, ready to leave at dawn. The morning was gray and cold, rain threatening on the horizon. As he approached the courthouse steps, he saw Calloway standing near the entrance, umbrella tucked neatly over his shoulder. "Last chance to take the deal, Mr. Bennett," the lawyer called out. "It's a generous offer. You don't strike me as someone who enjoys losing." Isaac didn't break stride. "Neither do you. I guess we'll find out who loses today." Inside, the courtroom was half full. A few reporters lingered in the back rows. Judge Stanton entered, stone-faced and tight-lipped. The hearing was short, but explosive. Isaac submitted the USB containing Eva's internal documents, along with an affidavit. He detailed how Capital Trust targeted minority homeowners, fast-tracked evictions, and knowingly used forged signatures to seize property. Calloway objected vehemently. Claimed the evidence was stolen, irrelevant, and manipulated. But Stanton, to everyone's shock, didn't immediately dismiss the claims. Instead, he said coldly, "We will reconvene in 72 hours for review. If Mr. Bennett's claims prove accurate, the court will issue an emergency injunction and begin a formal fraud inquiry." Isaac left the courthouse to a storm of flashing cameras and murmured questions. He had turned the tide. But he also knew, now the real war was coming. Because a wounded system doesn't die quietly, it strikes back. And Isaac Bennett had just exposed his bleeding heart. Isaac Bennett stepped out of the courthouse into a swarm of flashing cameras and aggressive questions shouted from reporters crowding around him. Microphones pushed toward his face, frantic voices demanded answers, their words blurring into chaos. But amid the turmoil, one reporter's question cut through sharply, stopping Isaac cold in his tracks. "Mr. Bennett, aren't you afraid of what they'll do to you now?" He paused, the weight of the question settling on his shoulders. His eyes searched the crowd, absorbing the hushed silence now rippling through the mob. Every person waiting for his response expected defiance, bravery, or anger. But Isaac spoke quietly, with an honesty that silenced them further. "I've been afraid every day since this started," he admitted calmly. "But the fear of staying silent, of letting them win, letting them continue to exploit innocent people, that scares me even more." He moved through the crowd with Marcus beside him, gently pushing aside microphones until they reached the street. A black SUV idled ominously nearby. Isaac felt eyes on him from inside the tinted windows. He locked gazes with Marcus, who frowned, clearly recognizing the threat. "Get in your car," Marcus whispered urgently. "I'll follow close behind." Heart pounding, Isaac slid into his vehicle, gripping the steering wheel tightly. As he pulled away, the SUV stayed close behind, its presence looming like an unspoken menace. He drove slowly, deliberately, until finally, at an intersection, the vehicle veered off abruptly, disappearing down a side street. Relief washed over him momentarily, but he knew better than to trust it. Back home, Isaac entered his darkened house cautiously, instinctively checking every room. On the dining table lay a white envelope that hadn't been there before. He opened it slowly, dread twisting his stomach. Inside, a single note in bold letters. "This ends badly. Walk away while you can." He exhaled sharply, his pulse quickening. They had violated his home now, his sanctuary. Fear surged within him, but anger followed swiftly, overwhelming it. He crumpled the note, jaw tightening with resolve. He would not yield. That evening, Isaac sat alone at his kitchen table, head buried in paperwork, Eva Chandler's documents spread out meticulously before him. His laptop screen glowed with email exchanges revealing disturbing conversations among bank executives, lawyers, and even court clerks, all hinting at a vast network built on manipulation and deceit. Isaac meticulously highlighted each incriminating phrase, each callous dismissal of human dignity. But something was missing. He needed a direct admission of wrongdoing, something irrefutable. His phone buzzed, a text from Linda. "Meet me tonight at 10. Have something critical." Heart racing, he glanced at the clock, 9:35 p.m. Quickly gathering his evidence, he drove to the small cafe on the edge of town. Linda waited at a dimly lit corner table, her expression strained. "They're watching me now, Isaac," she whispered nervously. "Someone followed me yesterday. I can't stay long." "What did you find?" Isaac asked urgently. She handed him a folder with trembling fingers. "Emails from Nathan Calloway himself. He's panicking. He asked IT to delete records related to the foreclosure processes, specifically mentioning your father's case." Isaac opened the folder and scanned the printouts, his pulse quickening. The evidence was explicit and damning. "This proves intent," Linda said softly, glancing over her shoulder anxiously. "But please, be careful. They'll come after you harder than ever." "I know," he replied gravely. "And I promise, I'll protect you." Linda offered a sad smile. "I just want justice served." Returning home, Isaac began preparing a supplemental filing for the court, meticulously crafting arguments, highlighting the urgency and implications of Calloway's direct involvement. He knew he now held enough evidence to break the case wide open, but also enough to place him directly in the crosshairs of powerful enemies. He had barely finished his document when there was an insistent knock at his front door. Warily, he approached, peering through the peephole. 2 police officers stood outside, faces stern. Anxiety tightened his chest. "Isaac Bennett," one officer asked curtly when he opened the door. "Yes," he replied hesitantly. "We've received a report of suspicious activity involving stolen confidential materials," the officer announced. "We need you to come to the station for questioning." Isaac stood rigid, his stomach sinking. "Stolen materials? Who made this accusation?" "We'll discuss details at the station." "Please come willingly," the officer said, tone final. At the police station, Isaac sat under harsh fluorescent lights, his pulse pounding. After an agonizing wait, an officer entered, placing a thick file before him. "The bank claims you obtained confidential emails illegally," the officer said bluntly. "They've accused you of theft and cybercrimes." Isaac leaned forward urgently. "These documents were provided by a whistleblower legally. I'm being framed because I exposed fraud." The officer's expression remained skeptical. "They provided proof that the documents came from their servers illegally. Without direct proof of your innocence, we'll have to proceed." Isaac's heart hammered. It was a clear intimidation tactic, another brutal attempt to silence him. He recognized the strategy, the systematic suffocation designed to break his spirit. "I can prove my innocence," Isaac asserted firmly, looking the officer directly in the eye. "Call Judge Stanton. This is retaliation because I revealed their fraud in court." Hours passed as he waited, anxiety gnawing at him. Finally, an officer entered, visibly frustrated. Someone from the court intervened. "For now, you're free to go, but this isn't over," he warned sharply. Isaac emerged from the station at dawn, exhausted but resolute. Marcus waited anxiously outside, relief evident when he saw Isaac. "They're playing dirty now," Marcus muttered, anger flaring in his eyes. "Which means we're close to winning," Isaac replied grimly. Back home, Isaac discovered his front door ajar, his pulse accelerating. Inside, chaos, drawers overturned, papers scattered across the floor. Panic surged as he searched desperately for the evidence Linda had given him. Gone. He stood frozen, heart pounding wildly. Then, slowly, he opened his laptop. Miraculously, his cloud backup remained intact, every document safe, stored securely off-site. Relief flooded him, followed by chilling certainty. Someone was desperate enough to commit burglary to stop him. This was now a fight for survival. At mid-morning, a call came from an unknown number. "Mr. Bennett," Calloway's voice purred menacingly. "It's time we ended this unpleasantness. One final offer, a settlement, generous enough to ensure you never worry about money again. Accept it and walk away. And if I refuse? Isaac challenged. Then you lose everything. Your job, your friends, your freedom. Think carefully, Mr. Bennett, Calloway warned coldly. Some battles aren't worth the cost. Isaac clenched his fists, the phone nearly cracking in his grip. My integrity isn't for sale. This fight continues. Then expect no mercy, Calloway said icily before disconnecting. Isaac stared at the silent phone, heart hammering. The threat was unmistakable. They would unleash every weapon at their disposal to destroy him. Over the next days, harassment escalated. His utilities were mysteriously disconnected, his credit card suspended, even his email accounts flooded with relentless phishing attacks designed to compromise his remaining evidence. Linda faced similar harassment, her bank accounts were suddenly frozen. Marcus received anonymous threats, warning him to abandon Isaac or face personal ruin. Yet Isaac persisted, working tirelessly with the media to ensure his evidence reached public awareness. Journalists, appalled by the mounting evidence, began publishing stories exposing Capital Trust's predatory practices, forcing public scrutiny. 2 nights before the decisive hearing, Isaac again faced Marcus, exhaustion etched deeply into their faces. This is getting dangerous, Isaac, Marcus warned solemnly. Are you absolutely sure you want to continue? Isaac met his friend's worried gaze squarely. I have no choice now. They pushed me to the brink, but this is where I must take my stand. The evening before the hearing, Isaac received another late-night visitor. This time, it was Eva Chandler, eyes hollow from worry and sleeplessness. I overheard something, Eva whispered urgently, handing Isaac another USB drive. Calloway plans to present forged records tomorrow, claiming your father acknowledged the second mortgage. He's confident Stanton won't question their authenticity. Isaac felt a nausea grip him. Another forgery, another betrayal. But his determination hardened even further. Then we'll expose them, he vowed fiercely. Eva hesitated, eyes filled with fear. Be careful tomorrow. They're desperate. Desperate people are dangerous. I know, Isaac acknowledged quietly. But justice is more dangerous still. When she left, Isaac stood alone in the dark house, contemplating the battle looming tomorrow, a battle not just for his home, but for truth, dignity, and justice itself. He had never imagined it would escalate this far. But now, pushed relentlessly by an enemy determined to silence him, he realized the depth of their fear. They feared the truth, and the power of someone willing to speak it. Tomorrow, he'd face them directly, armed with irrefutable evidence and unbreakable resolve. The stakes had never been higher. But neither had his resolve. Tomorrow, Isaac Bennett would either shatter the oppressive silence or be forever crushed beneath it. Whatever happened, one thing was certain, after tomorrow, nothing would be the same again. Isaac Bennett had always imagined courtrooms as sacred places where truth prevailed and justice triumphed. Yet as he entered Judge Stanton's chambers, the cold weight of anxiety settled on his shoulders like an iron cloak. He knew too well how easily truth could become collateral damage in the ruthless game Capital Trust Bank was playing. Judge Stanton's expression was stone cold, revealing nothing as he silently surveyed Isaac, Nathan Calloway, and the packed audience. The tension was palpable. Cameras had been banned, but the gallery overflowed with journalists, neighbors, and activists, all waiting to see if one man could indeed confront, and survive, the entrenched power that sought to destroy him. Isaac took his place beside Marcus and Linda, heart hammering steadily as he set his stack of meticulously prepared documents on the table. Across the aisle, Nathan Calloway exchanged hushed words with his associate, his posture radiating absolute confidence. Judge Stanton finally spoke, his voice icy and precise. This hearing will address the allegations raised by Mr. Bennett against Capital Trust Bank. The court recognizes the severity of these accusations, specifically, forgery, fraud, and systemic malpractice, and will review all evidence presented today. Calloway rose immediately, adjusting his suit jacket calmly. Your Honor, this case is a clear attempt to discredit a reputable financial institution through unsubstantiated claims and illegally obtained documents. Isaac bristled but held himself steady. He had anticipated this angle. Calloway continued smoothly, we have secured original, notarized documents proving unequivocally that Mr. Bennett's father signed the second mortgage willingly. Isaac's pulse quickened, he expected deception, yet hearing it so blatantly proclaimed still ignited fury within him. Stanton nodded slowly. Produce your evidence. An associate handed Calloway a folder, which he promptly offered to the judge. Stanton studied the documents, brows knitted. These appear authentic, Stanton noted cautiously. Isaac shot to his feet, voice trembling slightly despite his efforts to remain composed. Your Honor, those signatures are not my father's. I can prove it definitively. Stanton raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Proceed, Mr. Bennett. Isaac pulled out the USB drive Eva Chandler had provided. He handed it solemnly to the court clerk. This contains an internal communication explicitly detailing the intention to falsify and expedite foreclosure documents, including those very signatures. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Stanton inserted the USB drive into his laptop, his face inscrutable as he read. After several tense moments, his eyes darkened visibly. Mr. Calloway, he addressed sharply, these internal communications directly contradict your claims. They explicitly reference manipulation of signatures and fraudulent notarization. Can you explain this? Calloway shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat. We are unaware of such emails. It's possible these are fabricated or maliciously altered by disgruntled former employees. Linda shot Isaac a meaningful glance, nodding softly. Isaac stepped forward again, emboldened. I anticipated Mr. Calloway would make such a claim. Therefore, I subpoenaed testimony from the notary involved. She is here to confirm everything firsthand. Judge Stanton nodded solemnly. Call your witness. The door opened, and Denise Fowler entered, eyes wary but determined. After swearing her oath, she spoke clearly, though her voice trembled with anxiety. I was employed as a notary public. Capital Trust Bank representatives pressured me to notarize documents I never personally witnessed being signed, Denise explained. Specifically, Mr. Bennett's second mortgage was one of them. At no point did I witness his father's signature. I was instructed explicitly to stamp them and move on. The courtroom fell eerily silent. Calloway rose, voice clipped with tension. Ms. Fowler, do you realize the gravity of your accusations? You're suggesting criminal misconduct. Denise lifted her chin defiantly. I do realize it. That's why I'm here. These documents were falsified. Stanton's gaze hardened further. Do you have any additional evidence, Mr. Bennett? Isaac breathed deeply, steadying himself. Yes, Your Honor. He presented copies of Linda's retrieved internal emails revealing deliberate plans to target minority neighborhoods, particularly referencing his family's property. Stanton examined the documents, anger flickering subtly in his eyes. These emails suggest a disturbing pattern, the judge muttered gravely, looking directly at Calloway. Do you dispute their authenticity as well? Calloway hesitated. He glanced at his associate before speaking carefully. We need time to review these accusations in detail. They're surprising. Surprising? Stanton's voice rose, indignation audible. They're deeply troubling. The allegations here are not mere administrative oversights. They suggest deliberate fraud and targeted discrimination. Stanton leaned forward, eyes locked fiercely on Calloway. You understand the implications if these accusations prove true. Calloway, visibly shaken now, nodded stiffly. We do, Your Honor. But again, we request more time. Isaac could no longer contain his outrage. Time. While you erase evidence and intimidate witnesses. They froze my accounts, burglarized my home, and threatened people who tried to expose the truth. How much more damage do they get to inflict? Judge Stanton raised a hand, quieting the murmurs erupting from the gallery. He regarded Isaac thoughtfully, respect now clearly reflected in his eyes. This court recognizes that Capital Trust Bank's actions have compromised the integrity of this proceeding, Stanton stated solemnly. Therefore, effective immediately, I am issuing a temporary injunction against all foreclosure actions by Capital Trust Bank until a full, independent investigation is completed. Furthermore, any harassment or intimidation of Mr. Bennett, witnesses, or associated parties will be treated as criminal contempt. The courtroom erupted into shocked whispers and scattered applause. Isaac closed his eyes briefly, relief flooding his exhausted body. But Calloway stepped forward defiantly. Your Honor, you cannot. I can and I have, Stanton interrupted sharply, voice echoing with finality. You pushed this court too far, Mr. Calloway. Your bank is accused of criminal fraud and targeted harassment. If I find even one shred of further interference, I assure you, the consequences will be severe. Calloway fell silent, anger radiating from him as he glared at Isaac. Court adjourned pending further investigation, Stanton announced firmly, banging his gavel emphatically. As Isaac stood to leave, Calloway approached, voice a harsh whisper. You think you've won? You've only delayed the inevitable. Isaac didn't flinch, looking straight into Calloway's eyes. If you believe that, you've learned nothing. This isn't about delaying, it's about justice. And justice won't stop until every last lie is exposed. He turned away, heart pounding, as the gallery surged forward, journalists eagerly seeking statements. But amid the noise, Marcus clasped his shoulder proudly, smiling for the first time in weeks. You did it, Isaac. You took down a giant today. Not yet, Isaac replied quietly. They're wounded, not defeated. But at least now, they know we're not backing down. Outside the courthouse, Linda embraced Isaac, tears shimmering in her eyes. Thank you for not giving up. Isaac shook his head gently. It's me who owes thanks to all of you. Without you, I wouldn't have made it this far. Denise approached cautiously, still visibly shaken. Do you think we've stopped them? Isaac exhaled slowly. We've slowed them down. But real justice takes time, courage, and persistence. And it always costs something. As he walked away, Isaac noticed Eva Chandler standing nearby, eyes glistening with emotion. She nodded solemnly, mouthing silently, "Thank you." Isaac nodded back, a quiet acknowledgement of mutual sacrifice. But deep down, he understood something crucial: this victory was fragile. Powerful interests rarely accept defeat quietly. They regrouped, struck back harder, and sought vengeance. Isaac knew Calloway and Capital Trust Bank wouldn't rest until they exacted retribution for this humiliation. As he drove home that evening, Isaac reflected on how far he'd come, from an eviction notice on his father's porch to challenging entrenched corporate corruption in open court. Yet the road ahead stretched uncertain and dangerous. His fight was no longer personal, it represented something broader, deeper. He had become a symbol of defiance, a voice for those who lacked the strength or resources to battle systemic injustice. But symbols, Isaac knew, were targets. His life would never be safe again. Yet, strangely, he found himself accepting this fate. Fear had transformed into resolve. Loss had hardened into purpose. Arriving home, Isaac noticed another note slipped beneath his door. Wary, he opened it cautiously. It contained just one line, neatly printed. "We warned you." Isaac crumpled it, anger surging anew. Threats wouldn't stop him, not anymore. They only strengthened his resolve. He had crossed the point of no return, and now only one path remained, forward, toward full exposure, accountability, and justice. He had sacrificed security, safety, peace, yet he felt no regret, only determination. Because Isaac Bennett understood clearly what powerful forces still failed to grasp. That once truth took root, it couldn't be destroyed. And now, truth had found its voice. No matter what consequences awaited him, Isaac was prepared. The real battle had only just begun. Isaac Bennett's triumph in court spread rapidly through every corner of the city. Headlines screamed his victory: David versus Goliath, local man exposes banking fraud, whistleblower triumphs against corporate corruption. His phone lit up constantly with messages, support, gratitude, and warnings. Each call, each text, intensified the eerie silence from Capital Trust Bank. Isaac knew this silence was temporary. It was the deceptive calm before the hurricane, and he braced himself for what was coming next. Days passed quietly, too quietly. Isaac rarely left his house, feeling eyes on him from every corner, each shadowy figure on the street becoming a potential threat. Each night, sleep came reluctantly, marred by anxious dreams and jolting awake to imagined footsteps outside his door. One evening, as twilight shadows painted the sky in purples and grays, a sharp knock echoed through his home. Isaac's pulse quickened. He peered through the curtains carefully, half expecting an armed intruder. Instead, he saw Eva Chandler, her face pale beneath the porch light, clutching a thick folder tightly against her chest. Opening the door, he saw desperation etched across her features. "Eva. What's wrong?" "They fired me," she whispered, stepping hurriedly inside. "Calloway traced the leaks to my office. They accused me of corporate espionage and theft. Security escorted me out today." Isaac's chest tightened with guilt. "Eva, I'm so sorry. I never meant." "No," she interrupted firmly. "You did the right thing, Isaac. And so did I. I brought you something important." She handed him the folder. "This is everything else I could gather, more internal memos, email trails, even bank records detailing campaign contributions to influential local politicians, including Judge Stanton." Isaac felt nauseated, stunned at the implications. Stanton's involved too. Indirectly, Eva explained, sitting wearily on the sofa. The bank contributed generously to his re-election. Calloway's confident Stanton won't let a full investigation unfold completely. He has leverage over nearly everyone in power. Isaac flipped through the files, eyes widening at the sheer scope of corruption detailed within. It was more than predatory lending, this was systemic, deliberate manipulation of an entire community. Eva had just handed him a bombshell capable of dismantling the entire network, but at an unimaginable personal cost. "Why risk this much, Eva?" Isaac finally asked softly. She hesitated, looking down, eyes misty with regret. "I joined Capital Trust Bank believing in their promises. They convinced me we were making communities stronger, creating opportunities. Instead, we destroyed lives. My conscience couldn't bear it anymore. When I saw your courage, I realized it was time I faced mine too." Isaac felt immense gratitude and responsibility. "Eva, you've done more than anyone could ask." "Be careful, Isaac," she warned seriously. "Calloway won't stop until you're silenced." As Eva departed into the night, Isaac knew she had risked everything. He was now responsible for bringing justice, not just for himself, but for her and countless others suffering silently under Capital Trust Bank's ruthless practices. Early the next morning, Isaac visited Marcus, presenting him with Eva's evidence. Marcus flipped through it, his expression darkening further with each page. This is dangerous material, Isaac. Exposing political figures means we're risking retaliation far beyond the bank. Isaac nodded grimly. But how else do we achieve real justice? Calloway believes he's untouchable because he controls powerful friends. If we expose that corruption publicly, his entire network collapses. Marcus sighed, rubbing his forehead. Then we do it publicly. We call a press conference. Make sure this story's so big, no one can silence it. That afternoon, they contacted local journalists, scheduling an emergency press conference outside City Hall for the following day. Isaac carefully prepared his statement, detailing Eva's evidence, linking Capital Trust Bank directly to powerful city officials and political figures. It was explosive, and Isaac knew its revelation would either topple the corrupt system or destroy him utterly. The evening before the press conference, another unexpected visitor appeared at his door. This time it was Linda Ortiz, visibly shaken, eyes haunted by exhaustion. Linda. What happened? They froze everything, she said, voice trembling. My accounts, my cards, even my cell phone service. They're sending a message, anyone helping you becomes collateral damage. Isaac drew her inside gently. You can't stay alone. It's too dangerous. Linda sank onto the sofa, tears spilling down her face. They called my father, threatened to seize his home. Isaac, they're ruthless. Rage surged through him, hotter than ever. We'll expose them. Tomorrow, this ends. They'll face justice. She met his gaze, determination mixing with fear. Then I stand with you, no matter what. That night, Isaac barely slept, haunted by anxiety and hope, knowing the next day's revelations would shape their futures permanently. Dawn arrived heavy with fog, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. News crews had already assembled when Isaac and Marcus arrived at City Hall, Linda and Eva standing resolutely beside them. Isaac stepped to the podium, eyes blazing with determination. Today, he announced firmly, voice echoing clearly over the microphones, I reveal evidence exposing corruption and predatory practices orchestrated by Capital Trust Bank, enabled by political complicity. He meticulously outlined Eva's findings, displaying financial records linking the bank directly to Judge Stanton and prominent local officials. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed furiously. Isaac raised his voice passionately. We trusted our leaders to protect us. Instead, they sold us out to the highest bidder. This is not merely financial fraud, it's a betrayal of our trust, our community, and our humanity. The press erupted with shouted questions, but before Isaac could respond, an unmarked car screeched to a halt nearby. Two men approached swiftly, flashing badges. Isaac Bennett, one said coldly, you're under arrest for suspected cybercrimes and illegal dissemination of confidential corporate information. Shocked silence blanketed the crowd. Cameras captured every moment. Isaac stood rigid, heart hammering furiously. Marcus stepped forward, furious. This is retaliation. You're arresting the wrong person. The officer barely glanced at Marcus. Step aside, sir. As they handcuffed him roughly, Isaac raised his voice defiantly. This proves everything. They're arresting me to silence the truth. Journalists shouted questions urgently. Isaac was hurried into the car, but his voice still resonated clearly, don't let them bury this. At the station, he was placed in an interrogation room, left alone in grim silence. Time stretched painfully. Finally, the door opened, revealing Nathan Calloway himself, face calm, eyes ruthless. I warned you, Isaac. Did you think your little stunt wouldn't have consequences? Calloway sneered coldly. You can arrest me, threaten me, but you can't silence the truth, Isaac shot back defiantly. Calloway leaned in menacingly. Truth. Truth is subjective. Right now, the truth the world sees is a disgruntled thief who illegally stole company secrets and endangered innocent people. Your credibility is destroyed. Your friends will abandon you. You'll be nothing. Isaac held his gaze unflinchingly. No. Because this is bigger than me. You can't silence the voice of an entire community. Calloway smirked coldly, standing straight. We'll see about that. As Calloway exited, Isaac's heart sank. He felt trapped, isolated, but then the door opened again softly. Marcus entered urgently, eyes fierce with determination. We've got you released on bail. They're losing control, Isaac. Public outrage is erupting. Exiting the police station, Isaac found hundreds of supporters chanting outside, demanding justice. Tears filled his eyes, relief mixing with profound gratitude. Linda, Eva, and Denise all stood proudly beside the crowd. Linda stepped forward, embracing him tightly. They underestimated you, Isaac. They underestimated all of us. Isaac nodded, feeling strength returning. And now it's our turn. As cameras flashed around him, Isaac addressed the crowd, his voice filled with renewed resolve. Today, they showed how far they're willing to go to protect corruption. But today, we show them the power of courage, unity, and truth. Cheers erupted louder than ever, echoing powerfully. But even amidst triumph, Isaac knew the danger wasn't over. Capital Trust Bank, Calloway, even Stanton, they would retaliate mercilessly. Yet, standing among supporters, he felt something new, genuine hope, powerful solidarity. That night, safely home, Isaac reflected deeply. They'd arrested him, threatened his allies, tried silencing him, yet he still stood. His voice now represented thousands. This battle had transformed from personal survival into a powerful, collective fight for justice. Calloway had unknowingly ignited a movement he couldn't control. As Isaac lay awake, contemplating the enormous risks still ahead, one truth resonated deeply within him: once awakened, the human spirit could never again be subdued. The bank had unleashed fury, but it wasn't Isaac's alone. Now, an entire community stood ready to fight back. Capital Trust Bank had aimed to destroy one man, but instead, they'd awaken thousands. The battle lines were now drawn clearly, and Isaac Bennett was ready. Because justice, once ignited, was unstoppable. Isaac awoke abruptly, his heart pounding furiously against his ribs. The room was dark except for the ghostly streetlight filtering through worn curtains, casting strange, flickering shadows on the wall. Outside, distant sirens wailed mournfully, underscoring his fear and uncertainty. Sleep had become elusive, haunted by nightmares filled with menacing figures and whispered threats, nightmares now disturbingly close to reality. His arrest had been humiliating and chillingly calculated, a stark warning from Capital Trust Bank of what awaited him if he continued fighting. But as he lay awake, eyes burning from fatigue, Isaac felt something else alongside the fear: defiance. Each attempt at intimidation had only strengthened his resolve, hardening him into someone he never imagined he'd become. He had lost his job, his financial stability, and nearly his freedom, but gained purpose. He rose slowly, stepping cautiously across creaking floorboards toward the window. Drawing back the curtain slightly, Isaac scanned the street carefully. The quietness of the night felt oppressive, deceptive, as if danger lurked just beyond sight. He couldn't shake the unsettling sensation of being watched, hunted even. A sudden knock at the door jolted him, adrenaline surging instantly. Breath shallow, Isaac moved cautiously towards the door, grasping the heavy baseball bat leaning nearby. Another sharp knock, louder this time. "Isaac, it's Marcus. Open up, quickly." Relief flooded him briefly before suspicion crept in. He peered carefully through the peephole, confirming Marcus's familiar face, etched with urgency. Isaac unlocked the door swiftly, pulling Marcus inside. Marcus's face was pale, sweat glistening along his brow. "We have to leave. Now." "Why? What happened?" "Someone broke into our office. Took nothing, but left a message scrawled across my desk." Marcus swallowed, visibly shaken. "Stop helping Bennett, or we stop you permanently." Isaac's chest tightened painfully. "Marcus, I'm sorry. You've already risked." "Save the apology," Marcus interrupted sharply. "I knew the risks when I chose this fight. But now, Isaac, they're done with warnings. Calloway's hired professionals. We've got to get you someplace safe." Isaac's mind raced. "Where can we even go? They'll find us anywhere." Marcus exhaled deeply, steadying himself. "My family has a remote cabin upstate. No addresses listed, no records to trace. It's off-grid. We can regroup there, plan our next move without worrying they'll break down our door." Reluctantly, Isaac nodded. The walls felt suddenly oppressive, each shadow concealing unseen threats. "All right, we leave now." They gathered minimal essentials hastily, Isaac's files, Marcus's laptop, Eva's crucial evidence, and slipped quietly from the house, blending into the darkness. The city streets were eerily silent, abandoned at this hour. Isaac felt exposed, vulnerable, sensing unseen eyes tracking them. Marcus drove swiftly but carefully, taking side streets and avoiding surveillance cameras as best as possible. Neither spoke, the weight of their predicament heavy upon them. The distant, twinkling lights of the city gradually faded, replaced by dense forests and winding country roads. Hours passed before Marcus finally pulled onto a hidden dirt path, barely visible among dense foliage. The cabin stood dark, nestled beneath towering pines, isolated and eerily quiet in the pre-dawn gloom. Isaac's pulse quickened again, paranoia tightening its grip. Inside, Marcus activated battery-powered lights, illuminating simple furnishings covered in protective cloth. Dust floated lazily through pale beams, accentuating the cabin's eerie solitude. "We should be safe here, at least temporarily," Marcus reassured softly, though his eyes remained wary. Isaac nodded silently, collapsing into an old chair, exhaustion overwhelming him suddenly. Yet sleep seemed impossible. Every nerve was electrified by fear and dread of what awaited next. Dawn broke slowly, the cabin bathed in muted light. Marcus prepared coffee, the familiar aroma offering brief comfort. Sitting at the small wooden table, Isaac stared into his cup, anxiety gnawing relentlessly. "What's our next move?" Marcus finally asked, breaking the tense silence. Isaac met his friend's steady gaze, determination flickering alongside apprehension. "We take the fight directly to them. Public exposure isn't enough, they've already proved that. We need undeniable evidence against Calloway personally. Something no lawyer can twist, no judge can dismiss." Marcus hesitated. "That kind of evidence doesn't come easy." Eva mentioned Calloway kept private records in his personal office, Isaac explained thoughtfully. "Information he doesn't trust to anyone else, private communications, offshore account details, everything." Marcus frowned deeply, comprehension dawning. "You're suggesting we break into Calloway's office? That's practically suicide, Isaac." "Not if we're smart," Isaac insisted fiercely. "Calloway thinks he's untouchable. He'll underestimate us. And right now, underestimating us is our best weapon." Marcus sighed heavily, knowing Isaac was right. They'd exhausted legal channels and public exposure, the corrupt system protected its own ruthlessly. This dangerous step, however desperate, might be their only remaining option. "You realize if this goes wrong, we lose everything," Marcus warned quietly. "We've already lost everything," Isaac countered bitterly. "But if we succeed, we can finally destroy Calloway's hold on this city." Marcus nodded slowly, decision firming visibly. All right. But we'll need someone who understands Capital Trust security protocols intimately. Isaac's gaze sharpened instantly. Eva. Marcus hesitated. She's risked enough already, Isaac. Asking her to help break into Calloway's private office. She deserves the choice, Isaac interrupted firmly. Without her, we wouldn't even have reached this point. Marcus finally conceded reluctantly. All right. We call her. Eva arrived that evening, face resolute yet eyes shadowed by strain. Isaac detailed their plan carefully, emphasizing the risks clearly. She listened intently, expression unwavering. When he finished, Eva nodded immediately. I'll help. But understand, Calloway's office is tightly secured. The slightest mistake, and it's all over. Isaac met her gaze steadily. We won't make mistakes. We can't. She drew a deep breath, exhaling slowly. Calloway has sophisticated electronic security, but I still have admin access codes from before my dismissal. We can disable alarms temporarily, just enough time to locate the information. Marcus frowned cautiously. They'll trace it back to you. By then, it won't matter, Eva replied fiercely. Once this evidence is public, Calloway will have far bigger problems. Plans solidified quickly. They would strike the next night, late enough to minimize detection. Each spent the following hours meticulously preparing, nerves fraying with anticipation and dread. Darkness descended again swiftly, blanketing them in anxious silence as Marcus navigated back into the city. Isaac's pulse quickened with each passing mile, stomach twisting tightly. Arriving near Capital Trust's towering headquarters, Marcus parked discreetly in the shadows several blocks away. Eva checked security feeds nervously, whispering instructions calmly. We'll have 10 minutes, maximum, once alarms are disabled. Any longer and guards respond automatically. Isaac nodded tensely. Let's go. They slipped silently through deserted streets, adrenaline fueling cautious movements. Isaac felt every muscle coiled tightly, prepared for any unforeseen danger. Entering through an obscure side door, Eva swiftly bypassed initial security using memorized codes. Within minutes, they reached Calloway's dimly lit office, the room exuding quiet menace. Eva quickly disabled the alarm system, urgency palpable in her every move. 8 minutes left, she warned quietly, anxiety thick in her voice. Isaac searched swiftly, heart pounding furiously. Marcus scanned files methodically, each passing second heightening their dread. Frustration mounted rapidly. Suddenly, Isaac noticed a small, secured drawer beneath Calloway's expansive desk. Hands trembling, he pried it open carefully. Inside was a hard drive, secured in a protective case. 5 minutes, Eva whispered tensely. Isaac's pulse surged violently. This has to be it. Footsteps echoed faintly down the hallway. Marcus's eyes widened in panic. They're coming. Eva swiftly reactivated alarms as Isaac pocketed the drive. They retreated quickly, narrowly slipping through corridors just moments before guards swept past. Reaching Marcus's vehicle breathlessly, they sped away, pulses still racing furiously. Only miles later, safely concealed once more at the cabin, did Isaac allow himself relief. He held the drive carefully, knowing their future, justice itself lay within. Eva sank onto the sofa, exhausted, eyes heavy yet satisfied. You realize this is the beginning, not the end. Calloway won't stop pursuing us now. We've declared open war. Isaac nodded solemnly, heart resolute despite the risks. They declared war first. We're just finishing it. He connected the drive cautiously, files illuminating the screen. Names, payments, offshore transactions, all detailed meticulously. Their victory was within reach, justice tangible at last. Yet, beneath triumph, dread simmered quietly. Isaac understood clearly, Capital Trust Bank, Callaway, and their powerful allies wouldn't accept defeat quietly. Retaliation would come swiftly, mercilessly. The shadows outside deepened ominously, a stark reminder of threats still lurking unseen. They had stolen back their advantage, but had also fully awakened the ruthless forces arrayed against them. Their battle was now inescapable, consequences irreversible. Isaac had crossed into dangerous, uncharted territory, gambling everything on this final confrontation. And as night enveloped them in quiet menace once more, Isaac Bennett knew one truth clearly above all else. Victory or defeat, there was no turning back now. The morning after the break-in, Isaac stood at the kitchen counter of the remote cabin, staring at the black coffee swirling in his chipped mug. The hard drive sat on the table behind him like an unexploded mine. Its presence filled the space with a tension heavier than silence. Outside, the pines swayed under a slate-gray sky, their branches whispering warnings only the wind could understand. The drive had kept him awake all night. Not from fear, but from purpose. The files it contained were damning, spreadsheets mapping decades of foreclosures accelerated without due process, internal memos detailing racial profiling protocols masked as risk assessment, and, at the heart of it all, emails from Callaway himself. Isaac had printed one of those emails. It lay in front of him now. Reclassify the property. It's low recourse, target before year-end to clear the books. Use code 48 for fast track. No delays. If the homeowner pushes back, initiate a legal fog strategy. Timing is everything. Legal fog. It was the bank's internal slang for a barrage of procedural delays, motions to dismiss, jurisdictional games, and counter-filings, a smokescreen meant to exhaust opposition before truth could surface. He'd lived it. Now he had proof. Marcus stepped into the room, rubbing his eyes. You sleep. Isaac shook his head. Didn't need to. This changes everything. Marcus looked at the hard drive as if it might bite. Then it's time to go public. Isaac nodded. The collective needs to see this. And the court. And the press. They didn't wait. By noon, they had driven back into the city, back into danger. The sun had finally pushed through the clouds, but it didn't feel like light. It felt like exposure. They arrived at the Justice Collective's modest office, where Boyd was already waiting. The attorney's jaw was clenched, his eyes bloodshot. He looked like a man who'd seen the edge of the world and was ready to jump if it meant justice. Isaac dropped the drive on his desk. Everything we need to bring them down is here. Boyd didn't speak. He connected the drive and clicked through the folders slowly, methodically. When he reached the first email from Callaway, his face darkened. This isn't just illegal, he muttered. It's systemic. It's planned. It's strategy. He leaned back, folding his arms. We're not dealing with a rogue executive. We're dealing with an enterprise built on corruption. Isaac nodded grimly. We need to file an injunction. Stop them from initiating any more foreclosures until this is investigated. And we subpoena Callaway personally. Boyd raised an eyebrow. That's a high-stakes move. I know, Isaac replied. But the stakes are already high. By the next day, Boyd had filed for an emergency hearing with the state superior court. The motion included a 36-page brief outlining evidence of fraud, racial targeting, and judicial manipulation. Attached were not only internal documents from the drive, but also affidavits from Eva, Denise, and Linda. Isaac's name was on every page as the lead complainant. The bank's legal team, however, didn't wait to be served. That evening, Isaac received a notification on his phone, Capital Trust vs. Bennett, defamation claim filed, damages sought, $5 million. He stared at the screen for a long moment, unmoving. Not shocked. Just tired. "They're countersuing," he said aloud. Marcus looked up from the couch, already knowing. Of course they are. It was the next logical play in the legal fog strategy: bury him under the weight of corporate offense. $5 million was a fantasy number. But the message was real: fight us and we'll destroy you on paper, too. Boyd wasn't surprised. They want to scare you out of continuing. But they're panicking. He handed Isaac a flash drive of his own. "I've sent everything to every major media outlet on the East Coast. CNN, The Times, NPR, ProPublica. I even pitched it to a documentary producer." Isaac's throat tightened. "That means this isn't just a lawsuit anymore." "No," Boyd replied. "It's a war." 2 days later, the hearing began in a courtroom twice the size of the municipal court where Isaac had stood months earlier, alone, poor, and dismissed. This time, he wasn't alone. The gallery was full: reporters, activists, law students, and ordinary homeowners who had heard whispers of his story. Some clutched foreclosure notices. Others held signs. "Truth, power. We are all Isaac." Isaac's hands trembled slightly as he took his seat beside Boyd and Eva. Across the aisle, Capital Trust's team was 10 strong, led by Bryce Calloway himself. The CEO's presence was meant to intimidate. Isaac met his gaze, and didn't blink. Judge Marianne Vickers entered, a woman with silver hair pulled tightly into a braid and eyes like glass. She glanced down at the file in front of her, lips pursed. "Let's proceed," she said. Boyd stood and opened with calm precision. "Your Honor, what we present today is not merely a case of foreclosure gone wrong. It is a pattern of deliberate fraud, orchestrated by a financial institution under the guise of lawful procedure." He clicked a remote, projecting Calloway's email onto a screen. "Initiate legal fog strategy. Timing is everything." Gasps spread across the gallery. Reporters scribbled furiously. Boyd continued, "This wasn't just theft. It was racial targeting. We will prove through documents and sworn testimony that Capital Trust designed its foreclosure protocols to exploit Black and Latino homeowners, assuming their lack of legal representation would ensure easy evictions." He paused, his gaze hard. "This is not financial risk management. It is economic cleansing." Judge Vickers nodded slowly. "And the defense?" Calloway's attorney, a younger man with a suit worth more than Isaac's annual salary, rose smoothly. "Your Honor, we intend to show that these allegations are inflammatory and unfounded. The plaintiff's evidence is circumstantial and illegally obtained. Moreover, their interpretation of risk classifications is speculative at best." He smirked faintly. "Mr. Bennett has transformed this into a media circus to compensate for a weak case. We ask the court to dismiss this action in full." Vickers leaned back. "You may proceed with your arguments, but be warned, I take media manipulation seriously. I also take mortgage fraud even more seriously." The first witness was Denise Fowler. Her voice quivered at first, but grew steady as she explained how she was pressured to notarize a signature she never witnessed. Boyd followed up by displaying Eva's internal records of foreclosure timelines altered to meet quarterly profit goals. Then came Linda Ortiz. Her testimony was sharp, pointed. She showed memos detailing targeting strategies using code language, high-risk zone, low-response prospects, pre-default fast cycle. And then, Boyd played the video, the same grainy footage of Calloway in the boardroom, stating plainly, "If we delay processing just enough, by the time they notice the signatures don't match, it won't matter. Courts side with banks. We win by attrition." The room fell into stunned silence. Calloway shifted in his seat. Judge Vickers stared at the screen long after the clip ended. Her voice, when she spoke, was colder than the air outside. "I will need time to review all evidence, but this court is disturbed by what it has heard today. The injunction will remain in place. Capital Trust is hereby ordered to produce all mortgage transfer records from the past 5 years for independent audit." She banged her gavel. Court adjourned. Outside, reporters surged. Isaac shielded his eyes from the camera flashes. A young woman approached him with tears in her eyes. "They tried to take my mom's house last year," she whispered. "But now I think, maybe we have a chance." Isaac didn't speak. He just nodded and gripped her hand tightly. That night, back in the cabin, Boyd received a phone call from a senior investigator at the Attorney General's office. "We're opening a criminal probe into Capital Trust." Marcus cheered. Eva exhaled a breath she'd been holding for weeks. Isaac said nothing. He stepped outside, looking up at the stars peeking through scattered clouds. He wasn't naive. He knew the bank would strike back. They had resources, allies, and dirty tricks left to play. They'd come after his reputation, his past, his very identity. But the weight of truth was on his side now. And for once, the truth was heavy enough to matter. The day of the final hearing broke with an eerie stillness. No birdsong. No traffic. Just the low hum of tension vibrating through the city's veins. Isaac stood alone outside the courthouse, his breath misting in the cold morning air. The sun hadn't yet breached the skyline, and yet the plaza buzzed with quiet activity, reporters setting up cameras, protesters clutching signs, observers murmuring in uncertain hope. It had been nearly a year since his mother's house was taken. Nearly a year since he'd stood in front of a judge, in a worn-out blazer, mocked for daring to believe he had a right to fight back. Now he stood at the center of a storm he had lit with his own 2 hands. Inside, the courtroom filled quickly. The press, the public, even law students from neighboring counties had come to witness what was now being called the largest racial foreclosure scandal in state history. Linda sat quietly in the back, her face pale but proud. Denise was beside her, hands clasped tightly. Boyd leaned over his notes, but Isaac could see the edge of emotion in his eyes. Even warriors get weary. When the bailiff called the room to order, a hush fell like a blanket over the crowd. Judge Vickers entered, robes flowing, face unreadable. She adjusted her glasses, tapped her gavel lightly, and looked directly at Isaac. "We are here to rule on the matter of Bennett versus Capital Trust," she said, her voice clear and strong. "After extensive review of the submitted evidence, witness testimonies, and public filings, this court has reached a decision." Isaac didn't breathe. The entire gallery seemed to hold its breath with him. "The court finds that Capital Trust Bank did, through an orchestrated internal strategy, engage in fraudulent mortgage documentation, falsification of notary attestations, and the systemic targeting of minority homeowners under the guise of risk-based foreclosure algorithms." Gasps rippled across the room. Calloway, seated stiffly at the defense table, didn't move, his face a blank mask of corporate arrogance cracking under pressure. "The court finds that the foreclosure of 419 McKinley Street, formerly the property of Ms. Rosa Bennett, was unlawful, and hereby nullifies all related proceedings." Isaac exhaled for the first time in what felt like days. "The court further refers all documentation and internal communications of Capital Trust to the State Attorney General's office for formal criminal investigation, and recommends the disbarment of legal representatives found complicit in misleading the court." Gavel strike. Case closed. And yet, Isaac couldn't move. Not until the judge looked straight at him once more and said, softly, "Mr. Bennett, your persistence has made history. Let the record show that justice, though delayed, was not denied." Only then did he feel his knees go weak. Only then did the tears rise. Outside, the air was different. It wasn't just cold, it was clear. Sharp with newness. Reporters swarmed, lights blinking like fireflies, but Isaac didn't speak. He didn't need to. Boyd took the questions. Linda gave her statement. Denise wept softly into a tissue. And Isaac just stood there, breathing, present, whole. In his pocket was a folded piece of paper, his mother's original deed, now legally restored. She was gone. But her name was safe. That night, Isaac returned to McKinley Street. The porch creaked under his steps just as it always had. The wood still bore the same knots and splinters. Nothing had changed, and everything had. The door swung open easily. No locks. No resistance. Inside, the air smelled of dust and memory. Faded wallpaper still clung to the walls. The kitchen tiles were cracked. The old couch had been repossessed long ago. And yet, it felt like home. Isaac stood in the center of the living room, listening to the silence. He had no money left. No job. No safety net. But he had the house. And he had his name. And now he had the eyes of the world. 2 weeks passed. Then a month. In that time, Boyd confirmed that subpoenas had gone out. Calloway had resigned. The Attorney General's office launched a task force. Several state senators publicly called for foreclosure audits. Whistleblower protections were expanded by executive order. But Isaac remained quiet. He didn't go on television. He didn't give long interviews. He refused a book deal. He ignored the corporate apology letter that arrived in a thick envelope, signed in a fountain pen and dripping with polished shame. He focused instead on repairing the house. One tile at a time. Neighbors dropped by, some with tools, some with casseroles, some with just a nod of respect. An elderly woman left flowers on the front steps. A teenager rapped quietly on the window to say thank you. A man in a wheelchair paused outside the gate, his voice low, "They took mine. But you gave me a reason to speak again." Isaac smiled quietly. Not because he felt like a hero, but because he finally understood that heroes weren't people who win. They were people who refused to lose. One rainy morning, Boyd visited him. The lawyer brought a folder. "The state wants your permission," he said, "to use your case as the basis for a public inquiry. A full review of lending and foreclosure practices. They'll name the investigation after your mother." Isaac looked at the folder and didn't speak for a long time. Then he reached for his coffee, took a sip, and said, "Do it." The Rosa Bennett Act was passed 3 months later. It required notarized video documentation for all foreclosure filings, mandated external audits for any lender with more than 50 evictions in a quarter, and criminalized algorithm-based foreclosure targeting without judicial oversight. It wasn't perfect. But it was a beginning. The last time Isaac visited his mother's grave, spring had just begun to thaw the earth. He knelt, fingers brushing the worn edges of her name. "I kept it safe, Ma," he whispered. "It almost broke me. But I didn't let them take it." A breeze rustled the grass. He closed his eyes and smiled. Somewhere far away, a house was being saved. Somewhere else, a homeowner was saying, "Wait, I read about this. I have rights." And somewhere in a tall, glass tower, a man like Calloway was thinking twice. Justice didn't arrive with thunder. It came in footsteps. One man's. Through dust, and shame, and fear. But it came. And it stayed. What can we take from Isaac Bennett's story? More than just the fight for a house, it's the lesson of unshakable resolve in the face of a system designed to break you. Isaac didn't have money, status, or a legal degree. What he had was truth, persistence, and the will to stand up when the world expected him to stay down. His journey reminds us that injustice often hides behind paperwork, silence, and fear. But it also shows that change begins when one person refuses to be erased. The power of knowledge, community, and courage can expose corruption that was never meant to be seen. When you feel powerless, remember, laws are written by people, enforced by systems, but they can be challenged by truth and will. Isaac's story is a call to action for anyone who's been told, "It's too late, you can't win," or, "That's just how it is." No. That's not how it has to be. So if you believe justice is worth fighting for, even when the odds are stacked against you, like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Help us spread stories that matter. Stories that give voice to the silenced, hope to the discouraged, and fire to those who've been told to sit quietly. You may not be able to change the world in a day, but like Isaac, you can start with one house. One voice. One truth. And that's enough to spark a revolution.